comments for today. And we'll start with anyone on anyone first. So if you have a comment, please put it in the chat or raise your hand or come off mute. There.
Yeah, mine's open. Steve has a.
Hey everybody, I'll even come off video. Steve Davis, Essex, Mass. And I sent an email to Pam, I think last week, who did respond. I appreciate that, Pam. And my comment is regarding phone bans in the school district. I think we've all seen this in the news a lot recently. This has been around for a few years. I think there's been numerous studies showing how detrimental it is to the kids to have phones allowed in school in any capacity. Town of Ipswich just banned them this year. Pam, you had responded that we weren't going to do anything this year and we were looking into it. The more I've researched it and looked at all the other towns who've put in a variety of different implementations of phone bans, it seems to be a really fairly easy, straightforward fix. And there's a variety of ways to do this. And I guess I'm wondering why. Well, one is, do we plan to do this? Two, why we couldn't implement some part of the ban sooner than later. If you look at what Ipswich is doing, it was as simple as they've got Yonder pouches for the phones, and I'm sure it's a little bit harder, but they've gone to the state and asked for Google Chromebooks for all the students, getting laptops out as well, because when the kids have their laptops, they're able to go on YouTube and games and do texting and whatever else. When it's a Google Chromebook, the teachers can control what actually the students have access to online. So I'd love to hear what we're planning on doing, if anything, and if so, why we would have to wait a year, as I really feel like we're behind. According to the state, over half the schools in Massachusetts have some type of phone ban already implemented. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually, Steve, sorry, can you just say your full address for the record?
Yep, sorry about that. Steve Davis, 11 Lowland Farm Road, Essex.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Any other comments for you, or did you see anything else? All right. With that, our next order of business is the chairman's report. As this is our first meeting of the school year, after our summer hiatus, I don't have a lot to report, although we did have our annual summer retreat, and I thought we got some pretty good work done during that retreat. So thank you everyone for time you took out of vacations, time in the summer to come and meet for that. We also have some great progress as far as it comes to exploring school building in Essex, which is also fantastic. But other than that, I don't think I really have anything else in my report. So we'll move on quickly to our consent agenda, which is the acceptance of warrants in the minutes from last week. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I think we are voting on vouchers 1010, 1011, and well, actually, do we have and the payroll voucher for August 29th? And I don't believe we have any minutes to, or do we? So the minutes from our meeting on
8/6. Retreat.
Oh, the retreat. Okay. So on August 6th. Are there any questions? Remarks? All right, so with that, we can take a quick roll call.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Thank you. Second.
Discussion.
Discussion.
I had a question. I don't know if Pam or Michelle could answer it for me. I was looking through the line items on our vouchers for instructional supplies. And I noticed that the middle school, it just says per grade level, like grade 6, and there's a whole list of supplies and then a lump sum. There were a lot of single line items for classrooms at Memorial that I assume are individual classrooms. Some of them had a teacher name, some of them didn't. I haven't seen any come across. I didn't start paying attention to it, admittedly, until the past 2. But I haven't seen any of those line items for Essex. And so I was just wondering how our budget is allocated at that level. Do teachers have a certain set amount that's discretionary per classroom, or is it up to the principal and the principals do a different way from school to school, or just sort of how that breaks down?
I think I got it. I think so too. It's principal level budget management. They're fairly similar in that each teacher has an allocation. Some do it by joint grade level, some do it by individual classroom. I don't know people to tell them that. But in terms of deciding what goes in, it's typically instructional supplies, construction paper, crayons, scissors, some just random selection. You did note a few things like John, I had a quick conversation with John, said things where you might be seeing some flexible furniture is likely the sale classroom where it's necessary for part of the program. And then both have ordered Scholastic, just not all of them, just vouchers come in at different times. So it's relatively the same process. There is some teacher discretion with the amount that they're given in terms of determining what the need is that year. And we rely on the principals to monitor what's coming in, and they do. They go through and see, are you ordering the same thing year in, year out? Are you thinking about it critically? Is this something really we need? Do we have something over here that could help? So I think we're relying on them to be day-to-day managers. It's relatively similar process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? So with that, we'll take a quick vote. All those in favor? Thank you. And then we will move on to subcommittee reports.
Hey, Chris, I just want to let you know I'm here on the phone.
Okay, thanks, John. I don't think we're doing votes by phone unless we need to start to, and we'll broach that subject at that.
Okay, I'm like 15 minutes away anyway, so I just want to let you know I'm here.
Hi, Julie on the phone too.
Start with our elementary facilities report. I don't know, Teresa, you probably have a bit to say about.
Sure. Yep. And I know Pam's got a lot of the update in her superintendent's report, so I'll just let everyone know that we did meet as the elementary school building committee for our first meeting. It's a big group. It's a really qualified group, really smart group, people who know what they're doing, and a good mix of people who are experienced from prior projects within the district and people who have professional experience but weren't involved with district building projects. We did some basic introductions, talked about our charge, went through open meeting law a little bit, which is really important because as we noticed in that meeting, things have changed since the Memorial School Building Committee, as each project has gone along, expectations have changed. And so we're reiterating the open meeting law expectations, and Pam followed up with some additional reading material for people. Pam gave a very quick overview of how we got to this point, which we've all received before, those step-by-steps, and showed everyone the resources, or explained the resources available. And then we talked a little bit about, and I won't spoil because you have the good info on all of this, but we did talk about the design enrollment projection from MSBA, which report we all have in our email. Part of the goal for that meeting was to vote on acceptance of that report, and we opted to hold and take a vote on accepting that report at our next meeting in just a couple of weeks, so that we would have a better chance to look at the actual report, not just the letter that came from it, summarizing the findings for the actual data. And in particular, one member of the group noted that there's at least one really project coming forth in Essex, and we want to make sure that what's in that report reflects accurately the status of how we know things to be now in terms of building projects and that sort of thing going forward. So what we sort of came up with as a plan is that ultimately we're not likely to challenge the report as a group, but we do want to sort of include an addendum to say this is what we know currently is coming down the pipe, just to make sure MSBA has that information. So we will discuss all of that at our next meeting and vote to accept the design enrollment projection at that time. We're still within plenty of time for this. So it was a really good meeting, really positive.
John, do you have anything to add on the phone?
No, that was a great summary. Thank you, Teresa.
So next is Finance Committee. Did you get a chance to meet, or?
We did meet this afternoon, yes. And I'll actually defer to Anna since this is my first run at this particular.
Okay.
Sure.
So we discussed quite a lot of things. For example, the going forward, the budget transfer layout. When the time comes to do the next budget transfer, we're gonna look at how different buckets might make sense together, just so we tell the story, and then maintain the original budget intent and the integrity. We talk about Michelle and Pam are going to update this school committee calendar to include the quarterly report dates into the specific dates, so we can include those in the agenda. We mentioned that next time when we meet, we're going to go over the finance committee bucket list. We have quite a few things that we want to go over. For example, revisit the finance policy that's needed, recommended by the auditor. That's for one, and some other things that's on the bucket list. We're gonna go over that next meeting to prioritize how we can achieve some of the things short term and long term. We also discuss about the current challenges with the different data sets in different system, 4 or 5 different system, including payroll, FTE, finance data, some manual, some in the system. And so Michelle and Pam are going to work to see, if for the ideal situation down the road, let's say 4 or 5 years, what are some of the things we can improve and how much does it cost, and what are the, the pros and cons. And that way we can, once we have the plan fleshed out, we can bring it to the full committee. Anything else that I missed?
I'll just say that we talked a little bit about, since this was my first involvement with the finance committee, what is the focus and charge? And my understanding is we don't have it written down somewhere, and there was some confusion based on past practice, whether or not that actually involves discussion of budget and or looking ahead, or if our charge is only on this current year. So I think we probably need to focus or clarify what exactly it is we look at. I'll say that, in being involved in a number of nonprofit education boards, finance committees always look ahead. So that was a surprise to me. And not sure how we talk finance without talking budget. So it'd be helpful to clarify that as a committee.
Mm-hmm.
And then to the policy committee.
We have not met yet. 17.
And the negotiations team has also not met. And we'll move quickly on to the superintendent's report.
So just to respond to the question about phone bans. We did have a conversation about it this summer, and I think the devil is in the details and in the language, because the idea of a whole ban evokes certain emotions and feelings and pro and con. So I think there's some debate to be had. But then as we've looked through some of what people are calling bans, we're already doing some of those things. So Newton, I think, is the example that was in the paper today, which is like put it in your locker. we're already trying to do that now, whether we're doing it successfully and it's, not an irritant to everyone during the day. I can't say that for certainty, but I think we felt ill prepared to make a sweeping ban at this point in time. And what I had communicated was that I think it's best that we look at each of the school levels. It's relatively a non-issue at the elementary. Middle has one approach, and then high school, I think, would like to take a different approach developmentally. So I think the right avenue for this is work that Julie has already started. And granted, it probably won't move as quickly as we may like it to, but I think it's a conversation with her students, her staff, and her school council, which is all of that group, multi-stakeholder group together, to kind of forge a way forward and come up with some recommendations for next year's handbook. What I'm going to ask principals to do is when they come in to give their report outs this fall is to speak to specifically their handbook language around it and how they're managing it on the day-to-day, just so we get a flavor for how we are actually trying to manage cell phone use at school right now. So I'm confident saying, well, we don't have something called a blanket ban. We do have practices in each building designed to minimize the use during the day for students. I think we all realize that part of the fatal flaw is that it requires each classroom teacher to try to be an implementer of this. And that's where you get another, 60 different opinions and interpretations of how to do it. So we absolutely have room for improvement. I don't think we're in any position to launch a policy recommendation or even a school-based practice recommendation right now before we work with our locals. Connected to that, and this is not in the report, so I'll jump in just a second. We're also trying to dig into what is the right path for AI. We talked a little bit about that at our summer retreat, because similar to when we started our cultural competency work, we're knowledgeable of it in a general sense, but none of us on the leadership team is necessarily expert enough in AI to determine what is the best course of action. The good news from the workshop this summer until now is that we did get the call to be able to join the DESI group. So Heather changed her summer plans and went out to glamorous Marlboro and kind of sat through the day-long establishment of that group. So we're going to be participating in and recipient of the guidelines that the state put out. So I think we're well positioned to move forward at a responsible pace. I just don't think we're ready to do anything just yet. Whether January might be the launch of something new, potentially. So that's a little bit of where we are now. And what we plan to do to keep this group informed and hopefully the public better informed about what we're doing, because we do realize it's capturing the headlines right now. That being said, opening a school was great. It was really fun and festive last week. Everyone is happy to be back and looking forward to a year that we feel is really going to be focused on the teaching and learning piece. And I'll say a bit more about that in a second. We got the Boston Magazine comes out every fall, and just put it where it need be in your kind of matrix of what makes a school successful. We've always reported on it. I would say take it with a grain of salt. It's one measure. It's not the measure. But we, maintained top 5 ranking in the Boston Magazine annual ranking of high schools. We slid to 3, but I'd say staying within the top 5 was a success for us this year. So that's a good indicator. And we have our open houses. We've been trying to publish those since mid-August, and we really encourage everybody to come. If you do have questions about cell phone use and how teachers are handling it and how the principals are advising them to, the open house is a great place, a great time to ask those questions, an opportunity to get to know the faculty, what the expectations are at each of the schools. So please come out and celebrate the new year with us. Teacher days. So last week, sometimes people wonder what we do on those 2 days when the teachers come back, but the students don't. Really, it's just over the last 2 weeks of August, prior to kids coming in, we do new staff orientation, a lot of school department and grade level meetings. It's kind of just getting everything prepped and ready to receive students. There's training that takes place, obviously classroom preparation. We did our all district gathering on Tuesday, the 27th. Chris represented school committee and came and shared some kind words and some words of support for the upcoming year. We honored Donna O'Neill. Donna O'Neill, our long-term choral director, passed over the summer after a long battle with cancer. Sound waves. We recruited as many sound waves as we could find to come, and they did a really nice piece in honor of her to celebrate. while it brought the room down a bit, it also allowed us to reflect on all things that Donna was and how committed she was to the profession, kind of set her as our example of what we want to strive to for the year. I mean, she was passionate about her work and about kids and about helping them achieve success. So it was a good point of reflection, celebration of what she brought to our district, but also a way to look forward and to try and challenge ourselves to be better this year. Authentic learning, teaching and learning is really, if you kind of narrow down the dip in the strategic initiatives, where we are, what's left this year is really a focus on the teaching and learning piece. So just in talking with the staff at that meeting, and for those of you who've been to it, we try to make it more of a pep rally, set the stage for the year, honor people's service, a moment to kind of reflect and be together before we start the year. But the challenge is really to start to increase our opportunities for students to engage meaningfully in the learning and be more mindful of taking their inputs and developing lessons which are action oriented for them and reflect where their interests are. I think you'll see when we report a little later in the school year, some of the data that we get back, that vocal data we mentioned in our DIP presentation at the end of last year, that I think we have students who feel very safe at school or report feeling safe at school, feeling respected, feeling that their voice is heard, but maybe not so much so in how they're learning and what they're learning. So I think we need to take some lessons for that to inform where we go forward. So the good news and the bad news is, well, not bad news, the good news and the growth news. The growth news is we've got some ways to go before we're hitting all our marks. The good news is we are on a forward trajectory and hitting the marks of the plan that we laid out to get to where we want to go. We knew it would take a long time to turn the ship, but I think we're making a lot of progress. And then just a note on team building across the district. This is something that is probably more an internal observation than people may notice on the outside. But just looking at, we've really tried to put some effort into breaking down the silos of schools and working together as a full district team, not just a collection of schools. And I think we're really starting to see some development in just the number of people that work between schools or have transferred between schools, that we are learning each other's ways, and that's informing us, informing us, kind of breaking down some long-held beliefs that maybe just are grounded in history and not any longer true, but also learning how each other work and learning that we can learn a lot from each other. And I think the focus this year is we're trying to create connections between levels as much as we are between elementary, because I think there's a lot a history teacher at the high school can learn from kindergarten teacher and how to engage students, and a lot fourth grade teacher can learn from the science teacher at the high school in terms of delivering content. So we're just continuing to work on building a district identity and having that identity be one of a full team, where whatever your role is, whether it's in the classroom, supporting the classroom, or maintaining the facility, all of those pieces need to work together to support outcomes for kids. So that was the goal and the discussion at our opening meeting. And just a note, we do our recognition of service every year. These are kind of the persistence awards. You keep sticking with it because sometimes it feels this is back. I'm not going to get that word out at this hour of the day. It kind of feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill. And you don't always see the rewards right away in teaching, but the rewards are there. And these are our very dedicated staff who have been here 15, 20, and 25 years. A quick look ahead at what's on the agenda for 24-25, and I did note this summer, but we have a bigger audience tonight, so I thought I'd make note of it again. We have 3 concurrent system-wide evaluations going on. The coordinated program review is the old name for it. It's now called the tiered systems review. But basically that's our compliance review of all things student services. We have our NEAS accreditation team will be out here in October to do the site visit. We've been preparing for the last year and a half the self-study, which we submitted to them. The self-study will be their guide. And they'll be kicking the tires on that when they come in and visit classrooms and talk. They will be talking to different constituent groups while they're here to kind of test whether or not our assumptions about what we're doing hold true. And there will be a report that's filed, the study report, which will kind of let us know what they think about what we're doing and how we think we're doing against the set of standards that NEAS uses to measure schools. All that's available on the site. on the website. I can certainly share that with you at a later date. And then we are also going to engage in some self-study this coming month in preparation for the DESI district review. That was the review we asked for when we were trying to find. It may or may not satisfy the larger need, but we were invited in and now we're in. So we'll be submitting the self-evaluation. When we talked this summer, we were under the belief we would get the full review. They may determine that we only get a half review. So it could either be a focus on curriculum and instruction or a focus on governance, HR, and systems. We'll note in there what we were trying to establish, what information we were trying to gather through the review, and they'll ultimately be the judge of what standards that they come in and take a look at. So I will let you know as soon as they confirm with us when they'll be here. My guess is the spring. We have some things coming, especially if it's going to be a central office review. We've got some major deliverables coming up here in the fall in terms of end of year report audits and building the initial budget. So having them in either the winter or early spring is probably optimal. We're also going to have some personnel shortages that we are aware of coming up that are going to slow us down. So more to come on that in our coming meetings. Then district improvement plan goals and a 3-year update are on our docket for this year. So Anna had mentioned this concept of the systems within, or the data systems that in the business office are ad hoc over the years. They're not an integrated system. So some of the reporting that makes perfect sense that people would want to see, we just don't have a system that generates it. So it was great having Michelle New to look and kind of kick the tires of our assumptions. She validated what we kind of knew, which is there's a lot, it's all person hours and a lot of manual mergers, which isn't really good for some of the reporting that we want to. So prior to Michelle getting here, Avi and I had been talking and reaching out to Triton to talk to them about what they did and what they went through to kind of get to the state that they're in. And it would have to be a multi-year plan. So that might be something we want to bake into the next round of district improvement, kind of a multi-year phase in a new reporting, a new data system that would support the reporting needs that have emerged. Focus on the leadership team this year. It ties right in. It is on the theme of teaching and learning and a focus on authentic learning. We're going to be doing a focus on observing and analyzing teaching. So we've set aside 6 to 7 full days over the course of the year to go through the research for better teaching protocol on observing and analyzing teaching. So we're going to re-engage. Many of us have had it over the years, and we might be rusty. We've got some new admins. It might be new to them. But what we do know is there's a new rubric for teaching and learning that we need to use for evaluation. So this is parcel of prepping the implementation of that next year. And then the library task force will get up and running this fall by hook or by crook. And the goal there is just to talk about how we can reimagine the spaces. We do have the new TAs who are on board and getting their feet wet in their spaces, and we're excited about that. But you know, we're hearing the feedback that we need a plan, and people have a lot of interest in what libraries I think could be. And I think one thing we'll stay true to since the beginning of this conversation is we don't want to just put back what was. We really want to think about what they could be and should be for the next generation. So in one breath, we're talking about phone bans, artificial intelligence, digital literacy. Is this role what it was 20 years ago, or does this role need to be imagined to be what it needs to be in 2030? So I think we want to take the opportunity, if we're going to get the resources to put it back, that it's something that builds forward and just doesn't feel like a reinstatement. And then we're going to continue forward with our Arts Council Health Advisory and the continuation of the middle high school schedule study this year in hopes that we can realize some of the positive opportunities that were identified last year by tackling some of the obstacles to get there. Just a quick snapshot, we've got about 21 new staff members, 10 teachers replacing retirements or resignations, the 2 new instructional coaches. Heather's going to talk a little bit about that new role. We're very excited about that. 9 teaching assistants, and our, again, retirements, resignations, or reorganizations, and 2 library TAs. You can see short bios of all of the new staff right on our web, and I'm fairly certain that the Meet the Staff link is in each of the newsletters that have come up so far this year. And then if we want to take a breath, we can go into, do you want me to do Essex Elementary right now? Are there questions on kind of the beginning of the year piece? I was hoping to have enrollment snapshot with you tonight. The data's kind of all, they're kind of cleaning it up right now. We've had enrollments right up until the last minute. So as I was putting it together, my number for pre-K and I thought it best to come back when the data was a little cleaner next meeting, so it didn't create more questions than it answered. But if there are any questions on the first part, we can talk about that and then maybe transition into how to build your project and what you do.
I think we're good,
Okay.
unless anyone has any questions.
I have one question on the first set of the
Sure.
on the DESI review, you said it might be curriculum instruction focused or governance, et cetera. Okay, do you get a choice in that, or is it based on what they're choosing?
We can indicate our interest area, but I think they're going to judge based on our self-assessment where they would like to come in. So we can't control it, but he did state we could. We also reached out to them with the explanation originally of why we wanted to get in. Like if you recall, they wouldn't let, you're not allowed in if you're doing, they wouldn't pull your name if you're doing NEASC and tiered review. We asked and said it was okay because we really wanted a certain set of information. I think that will work in our favor. I just can't say with certainty that they don't go through the self-evaluation and say, oh, we really think you need some help here.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? I would say go into the,
That's it. I think Teresa gave a really good synopsis of the meeting. I think the one piece that I wanted to report to you, which is what I did report at the Essex School Building Committee, was that document that I shared with you. It's called the Enrollment Report Design Enrollment Letter, or the they use a different word for it. We'll use them interchangeably, but they came up with the number that you would kind of build your schematics toward. What we were able to achieve there is, based on the enrollment, we had a conversation with them over the summer. As I reported, we submit they have all the DESI data, we submit our data, we verify the data that they have, and then they have a meeting where they take us through that report and what their findings are based on their demographic study. And essentially, the summary of that report comes through to what your design build number is going to be. They said 250 student headcount projected that you should design for at Essex Elementary. If you want to design to a full combined elementary school, I think the number was 550. I'll pull it up in a second. So long story short, in our initial meeting, the numbers seemed clear to us. We had no disputes with them. We did not know yet of the additional potential housing builds in Essex, which we've reported to them since. We met again because at that meeting, we voiced the concern that was brought up at our school committee meetings toward the end of the year that since we had done the initial task force study in preparation for the elementary two-phase project build back when we started the memorial project, enrollments changed, times have changed. It's 10 years old. We're making a major commitment to building. We're investing millions and millions of dollars into this project. Should we be kicking the tires again on whether or not we could merge the two elementary schools? So could Memorial in effect become the site at which we renovate or remodel to incorporate Essex students there? Or should we look at splitting up the Essex population into a lower and upper school with the upper level students coming to Memorial and just looking at a design option for a pre-K 3, a pre-K 2, or a K3? They basically said you've got to narrow it down. So we went with what the common conversation was, which was a pre-K 3 and a 4-5. They needed to think about that for a while, so they processed on that through August and then did come back with a letter stating, and you have that in your packet, that we can include the original statement of interest inquiry, which was renovate or rebuild Essex Elementary in accordance with the long-term plan. We can also study, as part of feasibility, combining the two schools into one, citing them at Memorial School. And they put some language in there basically saying the only thing that would become reimbursable at that point would be alterations to Memorial School to accommodate the Essex students. And then they also said we could look at the split model. So we are cleared to investigate those three. I would probably ask for Teresa. I think it took us a little time to explain to the building committee why we were doing that, why we were pursuing that. It wasn't, and this was of interest to me, that it wasn't common knowledge to them that there was this large conversation brewing about trying to merge the schools. So I'll trust you guys to, kind of keep an eye on how broad that conversation is. I think they understood the wisdom of it. I think you have a lot of people on that group who worked the first project and it took it as an understanding that if phase one was Memorial School and phase two was Essex. But, I think they were comfortable with where we landed and the why we are there and the wisdom in asking the question now rather than going to a full scale design to bring before the public and then trying to answer those questions then. So I think the good news is we are clear to look at all of the questions school committee felt we needed to. And I think once the Essex Building Committee looks at the report in this interim and then meets again, we should be able to, I'm fairly certain, be able to vote to move forward. Which means we could be on, if we close out our pieces of it, we've submitted all of our documentation, we should be able to be on an October MSBA meeting to get approval to go to the next level, and then we could start December, January, getting the OPM process going. I think the only other piece I'd offer, and then Teresa, you can give color commentary, is that it was very reassuring to hear from some of the experts on the SBC that we could probably handle the question of merger and feasibility of space and site space relatively quickly in kind of in an order of operations. We're very lucky to have several architects who have worked with MSBA and on school building projects. So, Teresa, looking for your comment. Like, what have I missed? What have I forgotten? Have I misstated anything?
No, I don't think so, and that's why I left it to you to do it. No, I think that you really clarified it. I also found it really of interest that it was news to a good number of people around this table, that we were even talking about anything other than straight replacement or renovation of Essex Elementary School as originally planned. So I think that does, it gives me cause to think a little bit about how everything feels so very widespread and involved when we discuss it here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the expectation or even the understanding among the broader community. So it did seem as though we had a good conversation about the order of operations and how to accomplish this in a way that doesn't turn into a cycle of spinning wheels. And it felt positive outcomes. Yeah.
And I think for me, what I find helpful is we'll have the OPM on board to hire the architect who will lead us through that discussion. So it stops being, well, Pam's had 7 conversations with the OPMs and that there's no way that's like, yeah, that's more common sense, or I think I know, but I'm not sure how I know. It will be in an objective set of hands who are expert, and they'll be reporting to a board that has like experts on it to be able to get it. So that's the exciting part of moving this along, to get the people we need in place to start answering these questions. I don't think we're missing anything else.
No, we will have, just as a reminder to this group, it's a public group. Those meetings are public, and we will have minutes that will end up being posted after these.
Yeah, and the video should be recorded. The video should go up, and you don't have to come. You can tune in and listen to the conversation, or come and ask the questions. It's exciting.
Any questions on that one? All right. Then
I remember what I wanted to just, no, it's again on the record. Because when we were talking about vetting the different ideas, site selection is important to a lot of people. Site selection will be included in this entire process. And I know there are a couple of different sites in Essex people want to put forward for consideration. So there'll be an information gathering on that once we get all of that team on. So that's not negated because we're looking at the configurations. I would have lost sleep if I did that.
All right. Then we're going to move on to our continued business, and the first part of that is a performance.
Yep.
Well, they're setting up, I know I'm here until 7, but then I don't think I'm going to be that one.
You're good now.
Well, I must have said it for Heather, so if I walk out in the middle of her.
Okay, yes, how do you feel about it? Happy New Year, everyone. So I don't know why we don't do a big countdown right in the confetti at the start of the year, because it does feel quite joyful. I think Pam said it really well. The opening of schools was not just smooth, but there was just a lot of like joy. It just, you can feel it. There's a lot of positivity, a lot of smiles. It felt great. It was exciting to be part of it, and starting from welcoming our new teachers all the way up to the kids come in the building and getting things up and running. So it's pretty exciting to be back in the group. We had help by resent.
Nope, I've got it. Just give me.
Now you're really testing my memory. So one of the first updates that I have on my list to share is our summer work. So it's continually impressive to me how many of our staff opt in to additional work and professional learning and training beyond their day-to-day. So this summer we had quite a few different things working through. Yeah. So we had teachers who have a chance to apply to do some curriculum work in collaborative teams. This took place right after school got out through the end of June. So there's a really great work that was happening. And some of it was really exciting to see everything from some AP course alignment at the high school where they're doing some calibration of the work, all the way down through some of their elementary special education, writing strategy, planning, and everything in between. So there was a lot of great connections and collaborations across teachers and teacher roles in schools, full grade level 5 working together around some interdisciplinary curriculum development, some other components. You're good. You're all good. So that was a good chunk of time with the teachers. And in order to do that work, they actually have to submit their proposal, submit their plan. A group of the professional development committee teachers have to vet, review, and approve. Ask some really thoughtful, critical questions, and then they return back with their evidence of their work that they did. So that was a big chunk of some work that was taking place. And then additionally, during summer work, there was also some opt-in opportunities for professional learning. So we were able to offer a full day around teaching with inquiry, and we had, again, from elementary up through high school, and across all different content areas, with teachers who were participating in this idea of like, how are we using student inquiry to think about our planning and move beyond sort of planning a lesson and then, the instrument we teach it, to more how we're using that inquiry cycle within our instruction and our unit to really drive the routine we do. We had teachers also take advantage of I think it's Teaching with Equity is the name of the course. We had a book study group that teachers opted to. We had an attendance working group that a wide range of staff across all the school had a chance to work under. So it was a lot of really great summer effort happening throughout the course of months. I remember it's lots. Thank you.
Got it.
I think induction's next.
Sorry, I'm just having technical difficulty.
It's all good. So next, is so during induction, Pam mentioned all the new staff that we had, and it was really great to get the chance together. So we actually spent a couple of days, the August 20th and 21st together, and we had a chance to start to build connections across the group. It was a really robust group and a lot of different roles and folks joining us. And it was just really exciting to see the connections being built in the room. They had a chance to really hear about our district vision, our strategic plan, think about what does that mean for us and what is our charge. We really dug in, like, what does that mean for me? We had an overview of safety, social emotional learning, technology, and got that snapshot of what will that look like for those onboarding for the certified roles for the next 3 years. So it was a really great group, and our leaders all took time out of it. That's one of the busiest weeks of the summer, and they all took time to come and introduce themselves. So they got a chance to see everybody's faces and have lunch, and the META provided ice cream sundaes. It was wonderful. So again, just lots of positivity and joy with the new staff and the new energy coming into the district. And they were just a really positive energy, lots of good groups. So
I'll just give a shout out. Safety presentation was done. Joanne coordinated with Andrea and the PD to come in and do that. And then Kim, I don't know how she got it together, but came in and did the forward training for everybody. So to Heather's point, everybody owns a little piece of it. It's great.
And so some of the folks that we onboarded this summer were our 2 new roles. So these are our instructional coaches. This is Hannah, who's our mathematics instructional coach, and Beth, who's our literacy instructional coach. Both are coming with coaching experience. So we have the benefit of we're building what this role looks like, sounds like for our district in response to our needs, but they're both bringing a wealth of experience of having been coaches in other districts to be able to be like, this worked well, this was a challenge, here's ideas, here's what I've experienced. So together as a team, but then also in collaboration with our district and our staff, they're starting that process of starting to build what this been like. So they really jumped right in. They've been in classrooms, they've been meeting with teachers, they've been in our MTSS team planning meeting. So they're excited and eager, and it's really exciting. So I was actually meeting with Hannah this morning, and she's like, I have to go, I'm meeting with the 4th grade team. Fantastic. So it's really exciting. This is something that's going to take us a little while to build. And it's something we talked a little about. Both of them have coached, but they've never started coaching in a place that doesn't necessarily have established roles. So there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also going to be a bit of this, we've said it, teachers playing in the sandbox a little. Some of our classes might not stand, some might really be strong. So we're going to really make sure that this is a reciprocal experience so that our educators, our leaders have a chance to be a part in forming what these roles are, to make sure that the goal of having this embedded in-house professional learning from content area experts can really help us continue to push our practice, enhance our routines. And some of the things that are already coming up are just really exciting. So, and just a big shout out, there was an awesome team of folks who participated in the interviews. So parents and staff from across both elementary schools. It was a huge team. It was really exciting to hear all the different voices. So, and we went through quite a few rounds looking across these 2 roles. So thank you to folks who did that. Upcoming this year for curriculum review, when we say curriculum review, we want to think about that idea of this comprehensive programming around these content areas. So what are we teaching? When are we teaching it? What resources might we be using? What are the instructional practices? What are our pacings? What are our courses? It's a really broad view. So this is on top of our other district review. Internally, we're going to be focusing on 3 curricular areas this year. One is the comprehensive health, social emotional, and that's really following the release of the new curriculum frameworks that came out from the state a year ago this month. Our science, technology, engineering curriculum review as well. And that will be, these are K-12. So that will be a chance for us again, like we did last year, to get that perspective through our grade levels to review what's in place, what do we have, what's working well that we need to continue to lean into, and maybe it's a matter of memorializing it, ensuring consistency, what might need enhancement, what might need replacement when we're thinking about practices, curriculum resources, and course offerings. And then the third one is world language. We're entering our 2nd year of a curriculum review in world language. This past year, the team did an amazing job leading into these modules. There's a lot. There is an intense module around training to align with the updated world language standards, which were also recently released. That just fundamentally shifts like how we're teaching and how we're assessing kids these content areas. They spent this whole past year digging into all of those. So it was really exciting, and they got linked into the state network and went to a conference this summer, and they're pumped and ready. So this coming year is really where we're going to take all the information, both about what we have and how the standards have shifted. And now we're really going to use both of those lenses to really think about what's next for us. Where do we need to lean in our program? And we're going to be continuing the work that started last year, both from the history, social sciences, and also the arts, which we heard a bit about with the Arts Council. And that will be coming up a more comprehensive overview about the findings from the Curriculum Council and where the recommendations are for next steps. With that will be coming the next summer period. What's next?
Well, is it worth just pointing out, like, we'll be ready for world language implementation? Which is out to 25, 26. Likely.
That's the goal. Yeah, that because we took a 2-year really deep study, looking at our knowledge about where we need to strive to be, and also where our current program is. That goal was that we're really going to be moving towards that implementation. Thanks. And then committee work. So these two, Pam highlighted both of these. We're going to be continuing the district wellness committee. The committee we met twice last year, and for the state recommendation, we'll be meeting 4 times over the course of the year annually. And during that work, team did a great job, really again calibrating what's already in place, where are we striving for, and based on all the different priorities of the members of this community committee. Targeted these areas as our priorities for this coming year. So our goal is to be providing recommendations for the wellness policy updates to your policy subcommittee, to explore recently released curriculum frameworks, which I gave you a highlight that will pair well with our curriculum review with our internal other staff. And then that third goal is to be curating supports and resources for our community to support wellness beyond maybe policy specific, but thinking more holistically in that proper community support. So I'm really excited for this group. And again, some nice representation of across members of our community and people coming into backgrounds there. And our arts council. So you'll be hearing from me the next time I come with we took all of the artifacts we collected, all the information that we had, measured it against a rubric in a self-assessment tool that was provided through DESE. It was a really intense process. And shout out to both of these committees' work. The council really spent a lot of time leaning in and just, even after we thought we were close to the end, they're like, no, we need to finish this all the way through. So we added an extra meeting, even after school got out, because they were so committed. We will be sharing back out the findings of the index and talking about what it will look like with next steps to build the action plan. There's a little bit of this TBD because the arts lead for the Department of Education was seeking to have funding to provide that year 2 network. Part of the benefit was we network other districts across the state. So she's hoping that she can have support for a year 2 that would allow us to do some more collaboration around the action planning, taking the results and collaborating with others to start to build that plan. Even if that doesn't happen, we're still going to be working on that year 2, whether we're building other networks with peers or we're going to do it in-house, but we're committed to continuing this work. So that will continue. Last one. Just a quick update of a project. So this is something that it's just it's kind of, we have to do it. So we're going to want to do it well. So our website hosting company they merged with another technology platform, and you have to update your website. So we figure it's an opportunity for us to take a pause with the required update to just get some input from the community. It's just a heads up that we're going to be sharing some opportunity for input coming in the district newsletter, the September newsletter, to gather input from the community about the website, what sort of organizational goals they have, visual goals they have, and how they use it to help inform that transition. So it's more of a visual organizational shift that's required, but we want to take the opportunity to get insight. So that's it.
Thank you, Heather.
Oh, sorry. No, that's not it. This is the biggest, most important one. And Pam already did shout it out. So the two focus areas was really leaning into the authentic learning. It's something that I think we've touched along the margins, but really digging in and having that be our star for this year, underpinning all of the focus areas in the work we do. And part of the complement to doing that work is, and Pam also spotlight this, the professional learning plan. So really being intentional about continuing to build those connections and the consistency and the communication across schools And one of the pieces of that is we'll have some PD pathways that staff can pick, but across schools and levels, they can pick an area of focus that they can really lean into deeply, and they'll end up having a vertical cohort of folks who lean into these primary focus areas, all pulled directly from our strategic plan and our district improvement plan. So we'll continue to keep you updated and share spotlights.
Thank you, Evan.
I promise I'm really done.
Any questions for Evan?
I have one small question. Tangentially related. You're a year in.
Yeah.
You're full of excitement every time we see you. Is there anything you need from us specifically to bring forward what you feel are the important initiatives?
I think honestly, anything that I'm doing is reflecting what the strategic plan is, the district improvement, so it's all in complement to that. I think that having a genuinely curious engagement about it lets our community hear, which it would be easy to just think like my kid migrated an experience. So the opportunity to come and share what might be happening that you may or may not have a direct link to is really, for me, that's the best part, is chance to shout out the work that's happening, you know, with our educators and our leaders. So the questions and the engagement is really the best part.
Thank you.
I'll actually pick up on that a little bit and say that, so I appreciate everything that's going on. I think it's a lot, especially with all the reviews that are going on. And I think, you know, one of my disconnects, I think, over the past couple of years is like, we know what's going on, but we never seem to have a line item that represents that work, right? And I know, Pam, you say it's a small investment relative to everything. I think our job is to advocate for the change that you're trying to do and get you the resources. And I think a couple things that just, and I'll ask a couple clarifying questions here and then I'll come back to this point. But so, for example, the history social science review that happened last year, what were the results of that? What did you learn, right? We've gotten several updates saying it's happening.
Yep.
But what came out of it? And what are the implications, right? And I'm not asking you to do that right now. You're probably going to do that later.
Yeah, you like the Arts Council, you're actually going to get a summary overview of what the identified, you know, what the findings were and what the next steps are. It doesn't, as you know, it doesn't have like a clean end, but we definitely have pathways that were decision points that were made in the end. So that, like the Arts Council, you will get that. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier. You will be getting an overview of what steps we took, what our findings were, and what those next steps and action steps for the implementation are going to be for the history of social science as well, in addition to the arts. So, yeah.
I was going to use this as an example to show you there, based on our conversation today, there is no dedicated single line item that's going to track back to the strategic plan. It's going to, for the pieces that have a curriculum component, it's going to track in the implementation year. We have no cost to implementation or no additional budget cost, no inflationary budget cost to ELA and lit implementation because we're in a multi-year implementation. Our next potential cost year will be 25, 26. So there may be things that we're including, and then it needs to come from each school, right? So our budget is a combination of all of the schools built together. So the impact at each school will be reflected in each school's budget and staffing request, if there's a budget for staffing request. If there's a large scale social science purchase, then that will come through probably in our cap list. That's where you'll see it. Now, what we can do to help make it clear for people is to, on that, like, you know how we have the small cap list this year, and where we could, we noted where it was linked to the capital plan. We can link where we can note or link on that document where it ties back to the curriculum review timeline, but most of this is just cyclical. And it typically doesn't come with, just doesn't come with a huge price tag unless we're doing a major not tech support, but materials purchase.
The only other piece I would say it lives in the two buckets it lives in until that stage, which I think Pam said beautifully, is stipends for teachers if they're doing work, for committee work above and beyond with the intensity of time, and or things like professional learning. So the history and social science, we were grant funded, so we didn't have to pay for it, but we did a field test this past year that would have had a cost impact had we not had that grant funded. So the two places would be professional development. Like, for example, the world language, we did invest in some professional development this coming year, specifically that history, social science, actually we got a grant fund. So some of this is, there may be a cost with like a curriculum review, with steps of it, but ideally we're trying to fund it with,
And the budget has built in, when you're still learning. So the budget has built in, or should have built in, 100,000 annual curriculum, small cap line. Just like there was $100,000 facility small cap line. Those were built into the budget post override 2015. I think 2015 was the year. And they were immediately cut in the following years because we had to make ends meet. But there is supposed to be a dedicated line item to fund these, just like we would fund regular cyclical replacement of carpets or painting projects. That's built in there, so it doesn't create a huge bump out one year in our budget, but we just aren't religious about, funding that. It's an easy place to cut because the conversation is, well, most of them are one-time costs. You can cut this line, and if you really need it, you'll pull from school choice reserves. So that's why it's not typical to see us build in a specific line item in the budget to get states.
Yeah, I'm not expecting there to be a specific line item, but to be able to tell the narrative of how we're supporting the efforts. So if you can go back to the coaching just for a second, and I appreciate, Heather, in what you provided us across the board here, the details, because I think sometimes we talk in generalities and we don't realize kind of who's actually being impacted by these. So I appreciate on this one in particular that, we're talking about math and literacy. What I'm not clear about is, are they working with just elementary? Are they working K-12? I know we had some discussion about what might be an effective strategy to work with teachers who either need or ask for support, or versus asking for support. So I just wonder if you could speak a little bit more to what, and I know it's in the process, you're building it, but what does that look like?
Great question. Some of that is already decided and some of that will be built. So they are elementary only. So they will be working with our staff K-5, general education and special education. And they will be working at both with Essex and Memorial. So they've got learning spaces in both of those. They've already been at both buildings, but they are going to be elementary focused. The question about how they start to work with teachers, for the first few years as we're starting to build out a coaching culture, a bit of that is going to be trying different models. There's a lot of different coaching models. What we know is if you ask too much of a coach, they're less likely to be successful. So that's why we didn't do a K-12, because that's a wide range of ages and developmental needs and curriculum and staff. But then because a big piece of it is so building relationships and having that coaching piece. So for this year and probably into next year, we're really seeing that there's going to be a layered approach for teachers, and that all teachers will be able to enable and will engage with them during early release days. So they'll be running sessions in the upcoming early release day on Wednesday in September during data meetings. So they've already started to collaborate with our intervention team to plan the upcoming data meetings. So with all teachers then. So there'll be some all. There will be some smaller group specific. So for example, one of our coaches is already meeting with a grade level team who wanted to interact around a particular tool. So they'll be doing small groups and targeted requests, and then one-on-one opportunities for teachers to ask to start to begin to engage in that coaching cycle routine. But a bit of what we're going to do is be building out, how do you request that? How do we plan it? What does that process look like? What is the length of time? And so those are the components in the sort of technical work we'll be building as we try to get a feel for what is really going to match our routine, our staff, our schedules. So that's the part that's still developing. But for this first year, everyone will have a chance to integrate with them in large and smaller sessions. And then there will be some opportunities to opt in for more one-on-one, especially in this first year. Additionally, they're meeting bi-weekly with their building leaders. So being partners in instructional leadership in the buildings, thinking about how our principals leading the work of being instructional leaders within their buildings and them being that content area expert. Did I get your questions?
It is, yes, and I appreciate that. And I know that you'll continue to provide that level of detail, because I think some of the parents hear some of these issues and I didn't experience that, right? And so I think it's helpful to be specific as we go through this, and also to not paint a too rosy a picture, because we know these need support. right? If it comes across as being already in place and already perfect, what else is there to do? So, appreciate that.
All right, thank you, Heather. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, so our last order of business is to further discuss school committee goal development. With only 4 of us here now, does anyone have any specifics, or have you thought about that a bit more, coming out of our summer workshop? I know we identified goals we wanted to meet, and sort of clarified what those top goals are. Seen a couple of emails back and forth that there's maybe some few areas that may be easier that we should still include, but to be honest, I was on here, but we didn't discuss, much about how we want to frame this conversation.
So I have a question because I was not at the retreat, and I'm trying to pull it up right now, what came out of it. I believe that one of them, and correct me if I'm wrong, was our goals for the year, was writing, one of our priorities was writing school committee goals. I thought that my impression going into the conversation was that the priorities would be the goals. Is that not the case? Are those not, it just seems like chasing our tails a little bit.
So that's sort of my idea as well, but we do need to decide as a committee how we want to tackle this. My thought was to, condense down the ideas and goals that everyone had. So, and determine which are the top goals that the committee as a whole feels are important to have as goals for this year. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I would agree with that. Particularly top 3 or 4, whatever, and try to focus on those.
Trying to pull up.
So, yeah, I have that document.
Spreadsheet.
So the priorities that you landed on were budget narrative, guidance for Pam and administration, collaborate town and budget planning, SC goals, priorities, and academic excellence. But they're not necessarily articulated in the form of one thing.
Right.
They're ideas, but they're not necessarily action goals. And I think, I know Teresa asked the question, and I guess I would throw it out there too. You've got Essex Elementary School, which is probably the overarching goal right now. That's not present. And that's, it is a ton of work in terms of community outreach and so it ties back with your budget. Just something to think about.
Yeah, so I think Kate, that fundamentally we've identified the topics, but not the outcomes or the strategies.
Can I ask the group a question? Do you feel like you all have common understanding of the topics, what they mean, and what the intent is behind them?
I don't think so, because I think that when we say budget narrative, we each have a different concept in mind. Listening to Pam's point about Essex Elementary, to me, the budget narrative right now needs to be spun towards our facilities specifically. I'm interested if that is how other people are interpreting that.
How I interpreted was that we should have a goal as a committee to early on in the budget process to come up with a narrative around, what we want to see out of the budgets that Pam has good direction, but then also how we're going to communicate that to, so we all understand like how that will be communicated to, right? So we should have a narrative, what, our goal is in delivering the budget for the 25-26 school year.
So the narrative being the outward facing part, but then the discussion with Cam and other administrators is reflected where on there.
I think it was the third point that you had mentioned, Pam. What was, you said something else about the budget. So I recall talking about, we all talked about just being, trying to be consistent.
Right.
So budget narrative guidance for Pam administration, collaborate,
So those two.
Town
right, is
budget
that what you're
planning.
thinking of?
and then SC goal priorities, and then academic excellence.
That it was the budget planning line item that struck me.
So just to prove your point, Katie, when I think of program narrative, my,
See, now you just said program narratives,
what did we say before?
budget narrative,
All right, budget narrative linked to program.
right?
My challenge and what I've seen a challenge for community members is that when it's driven by the 2.5% conversation, right, we lose why we're asking for the funding that we're doing. So how can we develop a budget narrative that is about the program rather than about the percentage? Right, the percentage has to be there. Right, but justifying it means talking about the program and the changes that we need to support and that kind of thing. That's what gets lost when we focus on the percentage. To me, that's why this.
So then the percentage doesn't have to be there.
The percentage always has to be there. We have to ask for an amount. But when it becomes
Correct.
about
Yes.
the percentage, that's all we focus on, and community members are tuning out because they have no context to engage in or provide input on that point.
So
Right,
it's
same
just,
thing with the vote for that.
no, I think I did. I did, for the record, I did. I think that we're getting a little bit lost because I think that's too prompt. If I had to articulate what I'm hearing into a single goal, part of it would be clear communication to our administrators about the proposed budgets that we want to review. And part of it would be how we communicate that, how we communicate why we need the money. No one wants to say, right, why we need the money to do that? Why we need the funding line, why would we need that line in our budget?
I think it's super helpful to include the principals and the teachers in this process early on. Like when they came in last year and talked to us, we asked them, what do you need from us? How can we help? What are you seeing? You know, they're in these buildings every day. So we really have to listen to them and lean on them for advice. And I think the sooner we can do that, the better as we plan these budgets.
And I think with any budget, I think we can offer initial guidance, in terms of what we'd like to see, like high level guidance, but then a lot of how a budget is created does have to do with our administration, right? So,
It all starts at the school level.
Right.
The principals working with their teams
Right.
to identify everything that's articulated in the plan. Where are we? What do we need? How do we need to get there? What resources do we have? Or do we need additional resources?
Right.
Not to overcomplicate it, because it doesn't need to be. The majority of resource asks will come in the form of personnel. That's typically what they need to make it run. That gets pushed up. Shell synthesizes it all, and we start to lay out our first pass at the district budget, having conversations among the team members about priorities, ranking, needs of one school versus another school, and that kind of balances into the district and their budget with our access. So it is all based on what they're putting forward.
Right.
I think that a pattern that we have run into over and over again is that members of the public and sometimes even members of the school committee feel surprised by the effect of some of the lines that we approve because we don't have the specific, right? We don't know which specific personnel is going to be leaving or who's going, like, I can think of some surprises that came in the spring that were ill-received. At the same time, if that information is put out super transparently very early on in the budget process, people start to panic, especially employees who know that discussing that specific line item. And I don't really know how to balance that, but I think that it's an important part for at least members of the public to understand is that it's a delicate dance, right? And it's not, the reason why people think sometimes after the fact that it wasn't transparent is because we're trying not to have panic that we're going to be making massive slashing cuts or something of that nature.
I completely agree. We have to be careful not to make it a personnel discussion. A, because that's not our purview, and B, that's not, we're not inciting panic or anything else. That's never our intent. But somehow we still need to figure out how to talk about the program as it relates to the budget without getting, and it's hard because we're a small district and sometimes that's, but we have to figure out that balance.
So where do you see our role in that? Wondering if we hone in on that, does that become the core of that goal?
Well, to me, that's what it means when we say a budget narrative linked to the program. To me, that's what it's referring to. Again, that's my take on it. Right?
Yeah, like a good example is a principal coming into us and saying, this cohort of students is falling behind in reading. We recommend hiring 2 literacy coaches, and that's very specific. Like I can understand that. So that's just an example. I think that was helpful for us last year.
But that's the information coming into us. What are you envisioning as the information going out? Right, when I hear the word narrative, I'm thinking how we're telling the story.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So what forms are you envisioning that taking?
I don't have a form in mind. I think that's the work that we're trying to, move forward, right? Figuring out what that looks like. I'm happy to go look, but if that's something we want to do, right? But I think part of our challenge here is we haven't actually settled on that being a focus.
Well, it's the number one priority, right? On our.
But I think, when we decided we weren't there, I think most of what we discussed around that is that not, so we didn't have time to go into the details about how these would be executed. So it really was high level. We need to improve as a committee, how we really everything along the budget, right? Because it's been, to be perfectly honest, not the best process over the past 3 years, right? So how can we start to improve on it? That's really, we all thought that was very, right? That was sort of the outcome, not about, we didn't have any specific directives come out of that in terms of how we're going to execute against that, if that makes sense.
And just to highlight that execute part, like we need to figure out a strategy. This is timely.
Right.
I have December conversations about this. It's pretty quick work between now and then, and functionally, there's nothing on our calendar that gives us as a whole group time to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not sure how much work it necessarily is versus us kind of getting on the same page as a committee. We can figure out how to do that. But again, so I know on the agenda this was here, but again, I didn't have any expectations around this discussion? Is this what you have expectations around the discussion? When
Yeah, I think just you, as a team, to continue to define what these 4 priorities mean to you, so we can make meaning of them in terms of helping you meet your goal around them.
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing around budget narrative, and it strikes me, and I'll just throw this out there for your consideration and discussion. You've kind of got 3 things going. We wanted to change the language of how we discuss the budget, but being mindful of the fact that we have a percentage constraint that's going to sit behind
the
us.
limitations around.
But we want to talk about what we're trying to achieve by putting this budget forward. I think the strategy or the discussion among the school committee is, how are you going to prioritize the needs? I can tell you what my recipe would be, but I see that the Essex Elementary Building Project is now kind of our priority focus in terms of a financial need. If we don't solve that problem, it's going to draw down our reserves to maintain that building, which takes away our liquidity to float your operational budget. So if we don't all go all in on getting this project, whatever the project may be, but getting the facilities problem solved, you're going to have an operational budget problem continually. That is going to be driven by percentage and dwindling one-time amounts. So if we put Essex Elementary as a financial North Star, so to speak, then what are the reasonable expectations around growth level of your budget, knowing that whether we're talking about program or just maintaining basic needs, we're going to be wrestling with a 4.5 growth rate that we need to manage down to 2.5 every year. We could talk about what we're trying to achieve and maintain with that budget in a different way, but I think that's the strategy we need to discuss in terms of how we prioritize things going forward. Can you go into a major expansion of your operational budget when you're trying to and preparing for a multi-million-dollar override for a facility? I don't know.
That would be.
That's kind of the question for this. Yeah.
When you refer to the Essex facility problem, is that just the maintenance problem until we have a new one? Is that what you're talking about, or raising the funds for the MSBA process?
Yeah, I'm talking, if we don't have a concrete plan for a new one in the timeline, then your reserves are going to have to go toward the long-term plan for maintaining that.
That building gets a lot of work. I
Understood. That's why we have the MSBA process.
Yeah.
But I think actions we take with our operating budget and decisions we make there could impact the willingness of people to support the financial obligation and override for that budget. If we're not.
I agree. I think that in theory, I want the budget conversation to go the way that you're saying, Jake. I want it to be about the program and about how students learn and what our teachers need in order to make that efficient and enjoyable. At the same time, we have capital needs. At the same time, collective bargaining comes into play. And the program doesn't always get everything that we want to give it. It never gets everything we want to give it. But at this point, the conversation, I think at this point, we need to make a mindful decision to be fiscally responsible in order to prioritize the capital need of Essex Elementary.
I guess I'm not understanding how these are.
I feel like it's very difficult to talk about growing the program while we're also talking about needing them potentially, well, inevitably needing a large override in order to fund Essex Elementary.
So I think this is getting into a little bit of like a debate. A little bit about what we feel. I'm not sure we want to do that.
Well, I think that we would need like the full committee in order to have that conversation. I'm honestly, I'm thinking out loud, to be
Yeah.
to be
I'm
transparent.
just saying it's starting to sound to me like we're starting to,
It's my own internal debate, Chris.
Let me just clarify one point that I think is now being made explicit that I did not suggest. And that is that by developing a budget narrative that links the program, it doesn't mean that we're advocating for growth. It
Right.
means that we're trying to justify the budget as we're presenting it and advocating for it. Whether or not we choose to grow it or not, that's a conversation we have to have.
Right.
All I'm saying is, shift the narrative from the percent to the program.
right.
That's important. I agree. Thank you. That's a good clarity.
All right, so I think for tonight, unless anyone wants to bring up, because again, I think it is better to have a full committee here when we do discuss this, so.
When we set ourselves a task.
I was going to say
we
it's
come
early,
prepared.
right? It's 7:30 now.
Right. Yep.
Are there smaller pieces of this puzzle that we can tackle now or?
Nope.
But is there something we can individually do that we can bring with us next time so that we,
I think so,
we can
yeah.
spend hours doing this again, right? We can spend
Exactly.
hours.
Yeah, so I will take on the task of trying to structure these conversations a bit more, and I'll just send out a note to the team about like a reminder note to, at some point in time before to come prepared, these, if you want to discuss these topics, right? To come prepared to discuss this topic.
Would it work if, I sent a note to everybody with priorities and the assignment was by kind of end of next week? Or Wednesday, you can, take these 4 priorities, condense them into 3 goals that articulate your interpretation of them.
Right.
Put them in a Google sheet, put them in an email to me, I'll dump everything in a Google sheet. Then we can kind of line up and see. So how many of us are on the same page? We have 7 different interpretations. We have kind of 3 different interpretations and we can kind of blend them together. So at least we're working off of some type of everybody's opinion in front of us. And you can, we can do them anonymous or we can just kind of put our names or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
All right, so moving on to the additional school committee comment. Any other great stories from the summer like to share?
With our extra half an hour.
It's gonna be a good year.
I think it's going to be a great year. Yeah. I know I'm personally, really excited about the work that we've been doing over the past few months along the lines of our long-term capital plan. I think that's very exciting to me and a huge priority. So thank you, Joe, for taking on that work as well with Teresa. That's really all I had.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's just coming to me now from the listening into the building committee, building subcommittee. There was talk about doing a tour of Essex Elementary for the subcommittee members. Will the public have the opportunity to take those tours also?
We'll set up some tours once we're up and running.
Make sure you include the basement.
Basement's first.
But if-
We're gonna meet at 6:30. The building committee meetings, I think, will start at 7. So we're gonna meet at 6:30, holding it at Essex next time, so we can do a walkthrough, visit the dungeon.
I think it would be great if we could
So-
have as many of those meetings in Essex as possible. Just easier for the Essex community to attend.
So let me share my thinking and you guys can push back. When we did Memorial, we held all meetings here, not at the site, so it was a place where everybody could come. My fear in putting them at Essex is it takes on the look of just an Essex only project, when in fact it's a district project.
Well, I'll push back slightly and say that I think it would be equitable to have half or something, because here is still in Manchester. And here is still right across from Memorial. And here is still, and I don't, for example, today I drove back and forth to Manchester 4 times in between kid drop-offs and sports practices And it adds up, right?
I would advocate that as many meetings be in the 6th as possible.
Take it up with the other committee. I think we would be changing course. We didn't have them at Memorial. We had project-based meetings and community meetings about the building at Memorial. We held all meetings here at the joint site. I'll bring it up with the group and I'll let them decide. Yeah, I think we just have to remember it needs to be a place where everybody feels that they can come to. Yeah, and we'd like to think of our district joint middle high school as a place everybody can come to. It's in a central location. But
Well, we all know that we have kids from both towns and both elementary schools, and they are both places for everyone else.
trying to apply the same logic we applied to when we said we weren't going to hold the meetings at Memorial School in both of you. I got that. So, but I'm going to throw it to the committee and let them decide.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
25 more minutes.
Second? With that, I'll take a quick roll call vote. All in favor? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
The shortest meeting ever. Maybe except before time.
So, 20%.
Yeah, how can you
This is very nice.
Yeah.